Okay, this is the basics of a balanced Sage DPS. I normally run as a healer on this tune, so you'll see most of my equipment is Force Mystic, that's healing gear. But when I do story content, I put in some DPS legacy gear, so you'll see that my crit rating should be higher, but I don't really mind doing that with story content. 1456 is fine. Alacrity, it's a little high. I would trade the Alacrity for some crit, but the most essential thing is to have 764 accuracy when you're doing story content. The reason is if you don't have 110% accuracy, which comes from this, you will be missing some attacks, so you'll be doing damage at a much slower rate. As far as utilities, for PvE content, like non-boss content and going through mobs, you definitely want this Tectonic Mastery. That gives your AoE some more damage. Jedi Resistance is great because damage reduction always works. Pain Bearer is good for healing. And then in Masterful, I would probably only choose Mind Ward. Periodic effects, so that's like a dot that's put on you. That's super useful. If you were to do like operations, you would definitely choose Blockout as well. You would trade this for Blockout. As for Heroic, area of effect, this happens pretty normally in several operations, and even in some regular mob content. If there's any area of effect damage, you definitely want that reduced. And then Metaphysical Alacrity is great because it reduces the cooldown in your force speed, which is great for running through content. It'll also... Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say it granted these bonuses, but it doesn't. This would probably be a stun breaker if you wanted to take that. As in Legendary, for Legendary, you definitely want Force Mobility for any build, because it helps you become less of a turret, whether or not you're healing or DPS. And in DPS, we'll show you how you can run around and hit people even while channeling for something like Force Serenity. And then Life Ward, it's a toss-up between Life Ward or Valorous Spirit, depending on how you play. So your single... actually, let's go over AoE first. Your AoE rotation is not actually going to start with Forcequake. The reason is that if you have a mob, let's say this is a champion or a gold, you pick the strongest person in the mob, and then you put this dot, Sever Force, and Weaken Mind, these two dots on him, and then when you hit Force and Balance, it actually spreads the damage over time to everyone around, so everyone's going to be ticking for damage. At that point, then you should use Forcequake. So if you imagine this were the strongest person in the mob, you'd hit him with Sever Force, Weaken Mind, and then Force and Balance, which you can see how it spreads around if there were more enemies, and you would be doing dot damage plus your Forcequake. So that'll bring down mobs pretty quickly. And you can hit Forcequake again until this is on cooldown. Then you can hit Sever Force again, Weaken Mind, Force and Balance. Most mobs are not going to survive that long. As far as a single target rotation, you would start with Vanquish. It's a channeled dot, so if you were to start a fight, you'd probably start with Telekinetic Throw. Hold on, let me get the dummy. The reason is when you use Telekinetic Throw, I think there's a utility about this. Okay, well, I don't know where it is, but the Telekinetic Throw, if you channel this, you will build up stacks of Presence of Mind. Now that procs an immediate Disturbance, or it procs an immediate Vanquish. So if you're first starting a fight, you might want to either cast this first or cast this for an immediate cast of Vanquish. But let's say we're, starting a fight and no one's attacking us, then you have as much time as you want to channel this. Then Sever Force, Weaken Mind, Force and Balance, and then this is a channel attack, Force Serenity. Because we took that utility that allows us to cast when moving, we can cast Force Serenity while we're moving. And then you do Telekinetic Throw, 1 Disturbance, Telekinetic Throw, and then you repeat, and you have an instant cast of Vanquish. Sever Force, Weaken Mind, Force and Balance, Force Serenity, Telekinetic Throw, Disturbance, Telekinetic Throw. I'm going to do one more Telekinetic Throw because this is still on cooldown. So, those are available now, so I can go through the rotation again. See, I'm going to clip this Telekinetic Throw. I don't need all of it. I just want to make sure that I have Force and Balance and Force Serenity on cooldown. Sorry, that was supposed to be cast. Alright, so let's do Telekinetic Throw again. This is, I guess, your filler, sort of. Just a little bit more. Now I can cast it because by the time I get to this, Force and Balance will be cooled down. Now, ideally, you'd be using key bindings for this, but for the purposes of showing you what I'm casting, I'm using clicking. So this rotation makes sure that you have your damage over time or your dots on constantly, because that's what this build is all about. Now you're probably wondering about this Mental Alacrity and Force Potency. Mental Alacrity will help your Alacrity, and so that means your channeled attacks such as Force Serenity or even Telekinetic Throw tick faster, or it takes less time to fully cast them. And then Force Potency helps your crit chance. So in terms of the order, pre-battle, you would cast this, and then you would start your rotation. You would cast Mental Alacrity, then go through your rotation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm sorry. Mental Alacrity, 1, 2, 3. Then after Weaken Mind, you cast Force Potency, Force and Balance, Force Serenity, and then you just continue your rotation. And then hit these whenever they're on cooldown. So let's try that. Mental Alacrity, Vanquish, Sever Force, Weaken Mind, Force Potency, Force and Balance, Force Serenity, Telekinetic Throw. Alright, so that's huge damage for an opener, and I'm about to repeat the rotation. Now if you have relics, activated relics, you can use this to increase Alacrity, or maybe your Adrenal. I have a crit going on this character right now. So those are the basics. Other than that, you have, you can kind of be a passive healer with Force Armor. You have your Force Barrier, your Cleanse, Restoration, and then your healing abilities. Force Mend only works on yourself. Rejuvenate you can use for other party members, and Benevolence as well. Then your Interrupt is Mind Snap. Force Stun will work on weaker enemies, and Cloud Mind is your threat drop. And then using Force Wave is definitely not a good idea next to your tank when your tank is trying to hold aggro. So only use it in a really dire situation, because if you use Force Wave, any knockback ability, that'll mess up the aggro meter with the tank. And that's about it.